again. Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Deputy Editorial Director at Media Post, and this is Insider Summit BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers. And with me today is Kim Bartley, and she's a senior advisor to White Castle, as well as she was the former CMO. Welcome, Kim.
Welcome to you as well.
Well, I'm so happy that you can join me. I mean, I have to say, I know you're also an instructor at Ohio State University,
Yes.
so you are definitely someone who people like to listen to. And I realized that when I was seeing Lynn Blashford, who's now the current CMO
Mhm.
of White Castle, she was posting and sharing things from you, and I was just so impressed with what you were posting. I'm like, I need to, talk to you. And then since then, Jamie Richardson, who is going to be speaking at our event in May, our CPG summit,
Mhm.
I told him what I was doing this week, and he said, "Oh, I love Kim. She's great. You'll love her." So, talk about that. I mean, this is a company you started with more than 20 years ago, and it's flourished. You flourished. Did you foresee that when you were first starting all those years ago?
Oh, absolutely not. And a lot of White Castle long-term employees will say, I took the job not thinking I'd be there forever. I was different from that. I wanted a permanent place to grow. I had just had my second son, and I needed stability. I had come from being unemployed and some bad other choices in the job market and wanted stability. And so White Castle provided that for me and a lot more, obviously, because I was there for 31 years
Oh my
before I
gosh.
retired. Yeah, yeah, it
Wow.
was a good time.
Well, talk about that path. So, was marketing your thing when you first started? Was that how you saw your career going?
Yeah,
Let me
well,
know.
what I probably the best way to describe it is I did a lot of zigzagging. It's what I tell my students. Don't expect a career to go one direction. I was on the agency side for some of our clients, which were food based clients like McDonald's, Rax restaurants, and a few others. And then I would go to the corporate side and work on, different kinds of brands on the corporate side. And then I got unemployed and found a job with White Castle. And they needed a shift. And this was, in the late 80s, early 90s. And they needed to shift from what they were doing to be able to better compete. And we just started to develop the marketing side of the business. Prior to that, it was a lot of focus on local store marketing and public relations. And an opportunity came up where the director of marketing left the company and I was the assistant director. And as they say, the rest is history.
Wow.
I kept moving into various roles. What I had bosses that appreciated was I liked variety and I liked challenges because I kept throwing those at my boss. I kept
Mhm.
saying, "What if we did this? What if we tried this?" And so they kept giving me more opportunities, and it's a great company for that reason.
Well, and it sounds like, I mean, with White Castle, maybe you didn't experience this because traditionally, or at least in the past, I think it's changing, but it was a very kind of a good old, boys' world. It was very, women weren't necessarily given positions like you achieved. It was more, they were kept more managerial. And I think you guys broke barriers. Talk about that. And were there things that you sort of had to, did things change as from when you first started to back when you became CMO? Did you see those hurdles maybe level out a little bit for women coming up behind you?
One of the things they say that women need when they analyze what adds to success is you need a sponsor, you need a male mentor, right? And I had that in my boss when I first started. Um, he wanted to see me succeed. He wanted to see how I approached the business succeed and wanted to bring that type of energy into a company that, quite frankly, didn't have energy and energy, including around change, just change in general, because
Mhm.
at the time I joined the company was turning 75.
Oh,
So it had not changed a lot in those 75
right,
years.
right.
All of my peers and all of the men I had to work with were men at the time. And I had been through that prior to coming to White Castle, being the only woman in the room, being the only woman in an organization who was traveling and doing things. And so, what I brought to White Castle was experience around how to work better First, I think with restaurant operations, because I think all restaurant operators have a personality. They're entrepreneurial in their spirit, and they want to be listened to. And what I found in my career at the time was that a lot of entrepreneurs don't feel that they are treated with respect by what I would call the corporate office. And I really went out of my way to show them how to think about marketing, how to think about advertising, while asking them to support some fresh new ideas. And as a result, they became my champions with my boss and with others. And that work with them. And again, I would help my team understand. I look at success based on basically I have my own personal 4-quadrant model. 50% of the people, you don't know which 50, but 50% of the people will want to do what you ask them to do because they want to do what you ask them to do. 25% are going to need a lot more persuasion. And then there's the 25% that no matter what you do, it doesn't matter. They're not going to listen. They've just made a decision and you can't change them. And using that, the focus became around the 75%.
Yeah.
And not worrying about the 25% I can't change their opinions. Now, in terms of where the company went, with the 4th generation coming into the business at the time, which is that 4th generation is now our CEO, President White Castle, Lisa Ingram. That whole generation wanted to participate, and there were a lot of women, young women in that side of the family that hadn't been involved in the business before. And that's where I partnered with one of the president at the time, 3rd generations, his sister, to talk about women in the organization because it was going to affect the future of children, grandchildren, et cetera. And she and I partnered on introducing to the company an organization that is it's called Women's Food Service Forum. It's been around for over 30 years, helping to develop women into C-suite positions. And we started sending. Marianne Ingram and I, we went to the event ourselves, and then we lobbied with all the guys to start sending women. And that's kind of how we kickstarted the whole thing. And honestly, some of my conversations with them, the next generation, the generation that was my age, was about their daughters. And I would talk to them about, they knew the hazing I was going through and went through that they helped put me through. And having a sense of humor about that helped, but proving myself, and I know this is a word that people are uncomfortable with sometimes these days. Why do we have to prove ourselves? Well, I think generally speaking, everybody should be proving themselves.
I agree.
And wanting to prove themselves at what they do. And so, the hazing was hazing. And could I keep up with the guys? We were a 24-hour operation. We worked 7 days a week in the field, and I did the same thing. I was the first person in the home office to go and work, on the overnight shift. Wow. And I did things like that to show them that I was on the same team. Yeah. And then our marketing department went and worked in the restaurants. We did that. 30 years ago, we started doing it, and they're still doing it now. Now it's company-wide that the home office goes and works out in the restaurants. And to me, the most important thing is a level of respect. Now, were there problems? Absolutely. We had to deal with harassment just like everybody else does. And I learned a lot about that. I had been through more severe harassment prior, so I had a very strong, and still do, strong opinion.
Not that you have to be so specific, the things that you don't want to repeat, but just some examples and how you went some more severe ones you're talking about. How did you handle that? Did you sort of grin and bear it, or did you need to speak up for yourself?
In one case, I spoke up for myself. And it worked out that it was investigated and found that I was correct. But that was when I learned how to handle myself better. Right out of college, I was just generally harassed. Bosses were arranging trips and were arranging hotel rooms. And then,
oh my gosh, really?
And stuff like that. I'd be in meetings and be the only woman in a meeting, and they'd be shouting phrases out at me and things that were inappropriate. And I made a decision I was going to rise above all that. And not let it intimidate me with the people I had to work with, but rather use it as a way of evolving into the role I wanted to have for women.
Mhm.
And there weren't women I could talk to, and I wasn't sure what men I could trust in the very early days. In the years later, when I got more confidence in myself, I made sure that all of the women who worked with me or for me understood they did not have to put up with it. So I took my learning and applied it. But I also applied it to the men because I do think I had one employee at one time, team member, who really did some things that I had to point out to him were totally inappropriate. And then the guideline I used with him was, if you wouldn't do it with me, don't do it with anybody else.
Right.
And there's assumptions, and I'll say this, that all men are the same, that all women are the same, and that's where the mistake is made. And
Mhm.
I had one young man say to me, he said, "You're taking all the fun out of the workplace." I said, "Well, you missed the point. It's the workplace, and we're here
Mhm.
to get a job done. That doesn't mean we can't smile and have fun and joke around, but there's a line."
Yeah.
And I think that's what we don't talk enough about. So in my classes, I do talk about harassment very clearly, and I talk about opportunities. And unfortunately, I've had some students that I've had to support through some situations like that, and they're not always from men. Um,
Yeah.
and that was the other thing. When I started out working, I had women who were angry at me for working. They said I was stealing a job from a man.
Really?
And well, unemployment, this, how they're talking about inflation these days and what it was in the early 80s. Well, that was when I started working, and unemployment was 12%. And so there was a lot of men that had been unemployed, and then they saw the efforts for women and of others, and it's a very confusing time for people.
The
And
women saying that, were they not women within your industry where you were working, but they were women who weren't working and thinking badly
there
of
was
you?
it was my secretary, and
So
she,
she's
and
working too. I mean, why? Because you're at an upper level and you should be down at a lower level.
there should have been a man in my role, and yeah,
I do
but
find some women don't like where I came into an organization once, and I shared a secretary with a
mhm.
man. She was okay being his secretary, but then when they all of a sudden threw, she did not want to be a woman secretary. Like, she did not want to take orders, for lack of a better word,
Yeah,
from
and
a woman.
women are and men communicate differently, and we have to learn about how to work with others in different ways. Um, One of the things that I think I learned a lot about over time, and I wish I'd known it sooner than later, was that certain personality traits don't do well with everybody. And so I look at it as one of the most important things you can do as a leader is know yourself, know what you're good at, and also know what you're not so good at. And it's when we don't know what we're not good at, and there's a lot of books on this topic, but when we don't really know what we're not good at, and we don't get good feedback. One, for women, a lot of people didn't want to approach women; they were afraid to. I ran into that often where I had to sit down with a guy, and he said, the woman cried when I tried to give her feedback, and I said, "What did you do?" And he said, "Well, I let her go." And I said, "Well, that's not helpful. Hand her a tissue and let
Right,
her compose herself or leave the room, but bring her back. She needs
right,
the feedback."
right.
And so I look at it, and I think women struggle sometimes. And there's a lot of the angst over young women and how they work or don't work to support each other, and it carries on into high school and beyond. And then the important thing I think for all of us is to figure out the best way we can support each other. And the business environment is not the same as your friend environment. And if we want to all move in the same direction, we have to learn how to communicate with each other in a way that is supportive.
Right. And
And
I actually want to jump on that because that is one of the things that really, one of your posts, because your posts were very, I mean, as you talk about, you do talk about harassment, helping women and wanting in the organization to help women become into C-suite. But you also posted that it's about not just supporting women, supporting men as well, because
yes.
I think, yes, I think there needs to be more women supporting women. Like, even initially you said, well, I recommend having a male mentor. And that
Mhm.
surprised me because, but where you started, that's all there were.
Mhm.
Whereas today, you're their mentor, or other women are in that position to then sort of pay it forward and be their mentor. But that said, it's you help men figure out how to talk to women better or just how
Yes.
to approach better. And just then it's the community, it's just everyone involved. And you have to look at it. It can't be him against her.
I, I I'm a big believer my whole life. Everything tracking back to even grade school was about equal opportunity. And my definition of that is truly equal opportunity. And then it's based on what do you do with the opportunity. If we, in that way, I think that a lot of the efforts that we've made for women in particular to try to help them with what White Castle we called family life harmony, not balance, because it's more about having harmony because balance is 50-50 and that doesn't always work to do the math. But the harmony between workers and the harmonies with our families means that there's give and take all the time. And along with that is the opportunity to help each other. And so, in that sense of mentoring, a woman can mentor a man around things he struggles with as much as the reverse is true. And when then you're lifting everybody in your organization. And at the same time, you're creating, and this is the other component of it, that diversity of thought that makes you a better company and a better culture. Because it's through that diversity of thinking, it's the thinking that we're looking for. And the experience creates the thinking. And so if we are embracing the different experiences and learning from each other, then we are all doing much better together and having better solutions for problems that affect the majority of us. So I'm a big believer that that ability to be direct and straight, and I think my team would tell you that I was pretty direct. And that was one of my areas of weakness was I was sometimes too direct.
Mhm.
And I've had to learn how to put phrases together better, to be more motivating in how I express myself. But I do believe you should be direct, and help people see what's really going on. And like I said, I talked to some of my male peers when with their daughters went to intern with me, and I said, well, let's talk about that. What environment do you want her to work in? Do you want her treated the way when I first started was treated? And I think that that's where you start to evolve the thinking when you try to put it in a perspective that is more universal for people. Like, what
Yeah.
do we all experience? So,
Right. No, I agree. And I definitely, I can't imagine when you talking about what you started going with. I mean, it's not that I mean, obviously I can imagine it because we hear so many people talking about it now, what they experienced. And now moving forward, again, it's people, I think sometimes it's shining a light. I think sometimes it's ignorance, people, and I'm not saying like then there's sometimes where it's just downright harassment, downright whatever. But it sounds like some of the men in your company were like, oh, it's just all fun. They're not thinking like, no, this is really hurting this woman's, like ability to be productive or whatever that may be. So I do think that the fact that we're talking about it now and being much more open about it, and there are women like yourself in these higher positions. I mean, I was just at automotive, which a very strong, male dominated
still
industry.
male, yes.
Most of our speakers were women. I mean, we had some men, but and at, obviously our speakers are all upper level, and so it's great to see that, and it's great to see how they're like yourself wanting to sort of help that path for other women just starting out, and sort of so they don't have to go necessarily through what you had to go through.
When I talk to my class about the opportunities of hiring and how to do that well in a company, the thing I stress most is why diversity of everything matters and why we all have our own biases. And I'm 5 feet tall. You can't tell by looking at me, but I'm 5 feet tall. Lynn is, and I tell this story, and she knows I tell this story, is almost 6 feet tall with heels on. And I tell my students around when she walked in for the interview, I was like, oh my goodness, they're going to think of us as Mutt and Jeff because of our height difference and because she's taller, and statistically taller women get more attention than short women on a stage. All that negative went through my head, and then I realized, wait a minute, that's not fair. And as a result of stopping myself from thinking negatively about a person who's just different, it became one of the best hires we ever had for the company, and obviously highly successful, and she's done a great job from day one working with us. I think The reason I bring that up is I think sometimes we forget that that experience of being short isn't something a tall person can have, just like I don't know what it's like to tower over somebody.
Mhm.
I also don't want to, I had roommates in college that were in wheelchairs and blind, and I don't know what it felt like to be them, but I can imagine what it's like. So I encourage my students, one of the things I encourage my students is to diversify your experience as
Mhm.
much as you can. If you've never had that experience, try to walk in somebody else's shoes. You can't, because you're not them,
Right.
but you can try to think about that other person in a different light. And I do think that helps when you try to turn it around. It's one of the methods of persuasion. You turn it around on the other side and say, wow, what it's like from that perspective. And I think that's what you do from a marketer's perspective. The best way to do marketing is to look at it through the eyes of your customer and not that top down, I know everything.
Right. No, definitely. But I also think an important part of what you said was when Lynn walked in, we'll go back to that story, you had this preconceived notion, which we all have those in our head
Hmm.
about all kinds of people. It's just there. We grow up with certain, biases, but you stopped yourself. And that's
Hmm.
what I think. It's not wrong to have that thought. I mean, it's not right. I'm not saying that, but it's just natural. It's human. That's who you are. You grew up a certain way, certain background, whatever it may be. You have that certain thought, but then check yourself
Yes.
and then don't act on it. And I think
Yes.
that's what's important for everyone, whether it be in business or in life. It's
Hmm.
just, it's okay to have that thought, but just really think about why you are having that and then don't act upon that bias. Just see what the reality is.
And that gets back to the important thing around any of us is knowing ourselves. And so I think it's really important that we help the next generation understand, the device is not knowing yourself. It's not the pictures, it's not the TikTok videos. It's looking inside and understanding things about yourself that every a YouTube video is not necessarily going to tell you. You have
Right.
to think. Yeah, I believe one of the most important things we can help our next generation of leaders understand is the importance to take time to think and take time. In my class, I don't do tests. I actually I focus on thinking exercises that have then basically I make them research two sides to every story and then come up with their own conclusions because I want them to practice thinking around there's multiple ways things can be done, multiple opinions, not just one opinion and or a couple of opinions. And they're learning about some critical issues that way. And I think that's the important thing for all of us to take that take the blinders off and broaden how you think
Yep.
in a way that allows you to then embrace creativity more than anything else and embrace the way people think and embrace the way the world engages, and then we do really successful things together.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I mean, obviously that has contributed. White Castle has seen extraordinary success over the years. And you obviously played a big part in that. And I think that's important, as you said, as a marketer. I mean, we were talking about people in some points, but even just as a marketer,
Mhm.
that is how, you reach the audience. It's not about what you think. It's not even about what this one target audience. It's like sort of putting yourself into what, you figure out obviously your target audience. I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of dimensions to it and you have to be open to all of those areas. And I think that obviously shows in what you guys have been doing. But all right, I have to this I mean, I could go on talking about this kind of thing for a long time, but I want to see a little bit side of the fun personal side of Kim. So since of course you're a craver, you have to be a craver. But what is it that you crave aside from White Castle? But what's maybe your one obsession, something that you really need to go to?
Oh, obsession. Travel. I probably and of that traveling, my husband and I are going to finally get to go back to Ireland because we love Ireland and we love the country and we try to save all our pennies as often as we can so we can go back there.
Yeah,
But we
no,
love to
my
travel.
parents, my parents have been, I'm actually fully Irish. My grandparents were all born in Ireland. One set northern, one set southern. So there's a little conflict when my parents got together. But yeah, so they feel the same. I still haven't gotten there, but
Oh, you should go. You should
I
go.
know.
This will be our sixth trip that we've been there, and it's well worth it. And we love going every time. And it's just the people are wonderful. I don't know how else to describe it. You feel very welcome.
Yeah, no, that's what I hear all the time. So I will. That is definitely on my bucket list to
Good.
do. But also, all right, now getting into that's trips and you plan for. How about that daily or maybe weekly? That little, you like. Okay, I just need to do. Maybe indulge in a certain chocolate, or watch a binge watch your favorite show, or is there
Oh,
something? Or,
yeah. So I over COVID, I found a British series that is what I binge watch. I try to watch it every day over lunch, and it's called the Silent Witness. It has, I think, 27 years on the BBC, and I it's all around the how you find the secrets of the dead bodies, and
oh,
what
really?
happens. Yeah, and so it's that part of the science fiction, or the mystery of the body and everything, and I enjoy that. My secret. Oh, I don't know. I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. And so I listen to, watch, read anything I can get my hands on that has to do with the words Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
I was in the Sherlock Holmes Society for a while. My husband,
Really?
yeah, yeah, it was
What
fun.
does the Sherlock Holmes Society do? Like what?
Well, there's a society in London, and they critique a lot of the aspects of Sherlock Holmes, the writing of it, and updating of it, because as you can see, it's one of the few characters in the world that continues to make a comeback in
Yeah.
different styles.
Hmm.
And then there's a society here in the United States. And long story short on that one, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as an example, is a member of that because of what he has written, and he's written books updating Sherlock Holmes stories, and which is a lot of fun. And there's a lot of I get, writing and authors who enjoy taking the concept of Sherlock Holmes and turning it around on its head, and a lot of now female versions. And he's been married, he has children, grandchildren, so it just makes it fun. So
So do you get like before COVID? Did you get together about this, or was it something that you did online? Or
you could go to London, and they had regular meetings. So I have some of the newsletters and stuff like that. And I haven't stayed a member, but it you could do all of that as a member. Yes.
well, when you first said it, because if you certain TV shows or movies you see, they have the Sherlock Holmes Society or something like that, and they're all like finding real crimes and they're solving them together. So I was curious, are you out solving crimes?
No, no. I do like the mental challenge that a good crime drama will give you, and
No,
because
I love
they,
crime dramas, so I'm
yeah,
definitely with you there.
yeah. If I watch it and I can predict consistently how it's going to end, then I don't watch it. I want to be challenged. I want to be wrong, because that's the mental exercise.
Well, before this has been awesome, but I want to ask you before I let you go, I want to ask you one more in terms of I like to, if you couldn't have been a marketer, and now we're going to take away being an instructor because that's kind of
Right.
related, I would be fill in the blank.
I would. Hmm, I started out wanting to be a lawyer when I was in grade school, and then I wanted to be the next Barbara Walters on television.
I was there once. I mean,
Yeah,
once that, not
yeah,
not
yeah,
that being Barbara.
yeah. I think what I would want to be, though, is a scientist. And I was never good at it in school, but I find the world of science more interesting today than I did when I was a kid. And if I could do anything, I think I'd want to go and try to study science. And in terms of experiment research, I think it's something that Lynn and I shared. We both like research, and studying and coming to good outcomes through research. I don't think I'd be a data analyst because of the data, but I do like the storytelling of data. And so I think I would have maybe gone in that direction. But when I went to college, you didn't have that many discussions around what were you going to be when you grew up, because it was pretty narrow.
Hmm.
So,
You
but
didn't want to be a secretary then, and nothing. We're saying a secretary is a wonderful career. I'm not saying that, but the fact that it was once just geared towards, women. You never saw, like, now you see male secretaries all
Yeah.
over, everywhere. So it's just whoever's better for the job and who wants the job. But
Yeah. Well,
um,
I was raised by my grandmother and her two sisters who never married. And the two women who didn't marry, my two aunts who didn't marry, they one was a bookkeeper and one was an executive secretary. And they taught me that we can take care of ourselves, because the three of them took care of my sister and I and themselves, and that there's a way to do it and to still enjoy life together. And even though our unique family unit um, uh, wasn't typical of the time, and I believe that uh, the options that they had were more limited than the options I had. And I hope that each generation past us is allowed to continue to pursue as many options as they want under that concept of equal opportunity.
yeah, and well, I'm assuming growing up with three strong women like that, and your sister, all that's, I mean, that obviously shaped you to become, to have the confidence and the desire to do what you're doing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that because I saw them work together, even though I also can tell you the sisters didn't always agree with each other.
That's your sister, I can understand that.
And but they were each unique, and they again, they reupholstered furniture themselves, and we went out and did the you know they did the gardening. I did when I got old enough, I mowed the grass, and they did their own cleaning. And we only had one car, but she had to maintenance it and she had to take care of it. And yeah, I think that's why it's sometimes hard for me to comprehend where the problem is.
Right, right. I think that's awesome. And I think obviously that's what created you. I mean, as I said, you're such an advocate, not, I mean, especially for women, but for everyone. And I think that
Mhm.
that shows. And when you talk about that background, it kind of, it sort of comes clear why. But, well, Kim, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this.
Uh,
And thank you for watching. And of course, we do this each week. So if you have a really impressive woman marketer like Kim, and you want me to sort of reveal more about them, learn about them, just let me know, and I will do my best to see if I can do that. Anyway, thanks again. And Kim, thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.